Hello and greetings, fellow loser. And if you think that I insulted you with that comment, I did not. I actually paid you the highest form of compliment that I can think of. I am here to, my name is Leah, and this is my YouTube channel, Nerd Girl Power, and I am here to talk to you today about a story that is near and dear to my heart. It is one that I've read many, many times, and it just never gets old. Now, guys, one thing that I am a sucker for is a good origin story. I love knowing why somebody has taken the path that they've chosen to take, what makes them tick, and, why they do the things that they do. So I'm here today to talk about my origin story. And no, I was not 12 years old where I witnessed my billionaire parents shot by some guy in a dark alley, which then caused me to don a cape and masquerade as a certain nocturnal creature and fight crime in the night and clean up the streets that way. No. And unfortunately, I don't have billionaire parents either. No. But what I am here to talk to you today about is my origin story as a fan of horror and as a fan of Stephen King. And in order to start, we need to go back to the summer of 19... I was 10 years old and only a fledgling nerd. I was starting to like science fiction. I was starting to get into Batman. I like shows like MacGyver, Quantum Leap. I was on the path of becoming the nerd that I am today. But I had not had much experience with horror movies at that point. Not yet. But that summer I attended day camp. And my counselor, she was reading this book. And she, for whatever reason, decided to discuss this book with us kids. And it was a book about a clown that lived in the sewers, and it could take on the form of whatever you were afraid of. Well, this freaked me out. I took this way too seriously. I spent that summer assiduously avoiding storm drains, showering or taking a bath in the house alone. Nuh-uh, no way. I constantly was looking at the drains to make sure that, no clowns appeared. So, this entire concept terrified me. I was an imaginative kid, so I think I had more than a few nightmares about this clown. But soon I pretty much forgot about this. I didn't think about that. I continued on my merry way. And fast forward 2 years, I'm 12 years old and, quite worldly at that point. Still working on, becoming a nerd. But one day, I happened to pick up the TV section of our local newspaper. And it informed us that there would be a miniseries that would air later that week. And this miniseries focused on a clown who lived in the sewers and who could take on the form of whatever you were afraid of. And it also focused on kids that had to beat this clown or take on this clown both as children and as adults. Now, of course, I'm talking about the 1990 miniseries It, starring Tim Curry as Pennywise the Dancing Clown. So I did what any rational, sane person would do. I watched this miniseries. And guys, 12-year-old me thought it was straight flames. I loved it. I loved the kids and how they stood together to fight against both the bullies and the clown that was terrorizing their town. I also loved Tim Curry as Pennywise the Dancing Clown. I think that inspired even more nightmares. But anyway, after I was done watching the miniseries, I heard that it was based on a book by some guy named Stephen King. So I thought, I need to check out this book because even at that age, I knew that the book was usually better than the movie or the whatever on-screen adaptation. So I found the book, I got a hold of it, and it was 1,000 pages. So I figured to myself, give me about 6 months, I'll be done with it. I was a pretty prodigious reader, back even then, but that was 1,000 pages. I was 12 years old. So I read the book. Guys, it took me 1 week. I finished that book in 1 week. And I loved the book. Of course, this is the book It by Stephen King, and it was even better than the miniseries. So that is what I'm here to talk about today, is It by Stephen King. I'll be talking about the book, not about the miniseries or the 2017 adaptation. I love both of those, and I'm also looking forward to the chapter 2 that's coming out in 2019, but I consider those to be separate works, and they probably will get their own post. And to summarize, the book deals with a group of kids that band together to fight a monster that disguises itself as a clown and terrorizes their town by killing kids. Oh, and a warning, I will be spoiling parts of the book. So if you have not read the book and you find your way here, that is something to keep in mind. But I would like to start with a quote from the book. It's one of my favorites, and I love quite a few quotes from this book, but this one it sticks out. And here it goes. It's offense that you maybe can't live with, because it opens up a crack inside your thinking. And if you look down into it, you see there are evil things down there, and they have little yellow eyes that don't blink. And there's a stink down there in that dark, and after a while you think maybe there's a whole other universe where a square moon rises in the sky, and the stars laugh in cold voices, and some of the triangles have 4 sides, and some have 5, and some have 5 raised to the 5th power of sides. In this universe, there might grow roses which sing. Everything leads to everything. He would have told them if he could. Go to your church and listen to your stories about Jesus walking on the water. But if I saw a guy doing that, I'd scream and scream and scream, because it wouldn't look like a miracle to me. It would look like an offense. So yeah, like I said before, I love this quote. And the reason is because it deals with the cosmic horror aspect. I mean, when we talk about the story of It, we usually talk about the clown that kills kids in really horrible ways and can take the form of whatever you're afraid of, and we wouldn't be wrong. But there's a cosmic element to Pennywise the Dancing Clown. It's implied, King tells us in the book that he is not from this world, and he's not even from our dimension. He's some kind of interdimensional, transdimensional creature that lands on our planet and uses it as a feeding ground. And he's almost like an eldritch monster in the H.P. Lovecraft universe. And I think that is a fascinating aspect of Pennywise the Clown, and one that I love talking about because I just find that so interesting. Because I'm also, I like H.P. Lovecraft too, so I think it's really cool that King incorporated this element into this story. So, let me proceed on with another quote. A child blind from birth doesn't even know he's blind until someone tells him. Even then, he has only the most academic idea of what blindness is. Only the formerly sighted have a real grip on the thing. Ben Hanscom had no sense of being lonely, because he'd never been anything but. If the condition had been new or more localized, he might have understood, but loneliness both encompassed his life and overreached it. So, yeah, wow. And one of the reasons why I love Stephen King is that he writes about people. I mean, I know we associate him with scary stuff, and again, we wouldn't be wrong. I mean, he writes about killer clowns and cars that are possessed and haunted hotels and just all kinds of horror story things. And he is a writer of horror. That's what he is. But he's also a writer of the human condition. And he writes about people, and he writes about it well. I mean, this quote has nothing to do with the clown or, any kind of horror. It's talking about somebody, aka Ben, who has been lonely all his life, and it's the norm for him, and he doesn't even realize that he's lonely, because that's just how life is for him. He's been on his own and doesn't have, the company of people his own age. So it's something that's normalized for him, and he doesn't even think about. Just like how if you're blind, you don't know that you're blind until somebody tells you that you're blind. And even then, you can't realize what blindness is because you've never been able to see. And just how eloquently King can sum up loneliness right here, and how it's just beautiful. And that's another favorite quote of mine. So let's go on to another quote, and I love this one too. I started after him, and the clown looked back. I saw its eyes, and all at once I understood who it was. Who was it, Don? Harold Gardner asked softly. It was Derry, Don Haggerty said. It was this town. Now, in the book It, we've got a lot of characters. I mean, we have the Losers Club, Beverly, Ben, Bill, Richie, Mike, and so forth. The 7 of them. They're the major characters, and of course Pennywise the clown. And we have some more peripheral characters, like the parents of some of the Losers Club, Bev's husband Tom, Bill's wife Audra, and they're important characters, even if some of them aren't in the story very much, but they still play their role. But I think one thing that we forget to talk about is the town of Derry. And the town of Derry is just as much of a character as any of those I just mentioned, maybe even more of. I mean, Derry's not a person, but it's a living, breathing entity in my mind. It's a character. And often, I've read this book a lot of times, and I often have this debate in my mind. Is Derry it? Is it Derry? Or do they have some kind of symbiotic relationship where they kind of feed off of each other and they're responsible for each other's survival? I think kind of that third part is probably the most accurate, even though I don't know if that even sums it up. But when the losers are kids, they decide to do what they call a smoke ceremony, where they burn wood, they inhale smoke. Yeah, I mean, they get high, and they do this because they think that it's an altered state of consciousness will give them some insight into Pennywise. And it does, because Mike and Richie travel back in time, and I mean, they travel back in time to millions and millions of years ago, when there's still dinosaurs upon the earth, and they witness Pennywise landing on the earth. And Pennywise, when he lands, he actually creates the town of Derry. That destruction is the town itself. And when we read the book, we know that the losers, and we know that there's something terribly wrong with Derry. We know it, they know it, but either the people in the town, they don't know, or they just don't, they know on some level and they don't care. And I think actually that second part, with a lot of people that seem to know what's going on, at least on some level, but just not caring, that is probably pretty accurate, because Pennywise breathes vitality and life into the town, and that's why it survives and thrives. One of the parts of the book talks about the definition of haunt. And one of the definitions of haunt is a feeding place for animals. And that is exactly what Derry is to Pennywise / it. It's a feeding ground. And he hunts, and in turn, the town survives and thrives even due to Pennywise. So, and nobody's going to do anything until, well, at least the summer of 1958. So Pennywise grows complacent and he's comfortable until the Losers Club decides to try to fight him. But they're in the minority because really nobody in that town is going to try to fight the evil. So that's why that town's able to survive, and he needs a town, and town needs him, and I guess they love each other, which in a weird kind of way. And one of the other reasons why this story is so meaningful to me, it has to do with a particular scene where Adrian Mellon, he's a young gay man, and his partner are out in town one night, and a group of homophobic thugs from Derry single them out because of Adrian's sexual orientation. And the thugs then proceed to attack Adrian and his partner, and they feed Adrian to Pennywise. And Pennywise kills him off, finishes the job, but he never would have been able to do that if it hadn't been for the hatred that those guys harbored in their hearts for people that were different. So when I read this book, I realized, because I was a really nerdy kid, I was bullied, I didn't know what, people didn't know what to do with me, so I didn't really fit in anywhere. And I would read this book, and I would find a cool group of friends, and I would have fought by their sides if I could. Maybe gotten killed by the clown, but, at least in the company of some awesome people. But I also learned tolerance and acceptance. Those are beautiful things, and we need to accept people for who they are. There is enough hate in this world, and it's not necessarily, well, it isn't coming from an evil, homicidal, eldritch monster clown. It comes from us. We do just fine with that. That scene with Adrian Mellon, I don't think this term existed when I was a kid. When I read it was when I was 12 years old, but it would be called a hate crime today. And that's what King presented us with, was a hate crime, because somebody was singled out due to his sexual orientation, and something horrible happened to him. He was attacked. And this kind of thing still happens in real life. Far too often, people are singled out due to race, sexual orientation, any number of factors, and they are hurt or even killed, and it continues to go on. And we don't need to contribute. There's so much hate and intolerance. We don't need to contribute. We need to be compassionate, because that's how we're going to win. But anyway, guys, I could probably talk about this book for a lot more time, but I won't. I gotta sign off for today. So I leave you with, may your days be long upon the earth.